Hello everyone. I welcome you all to a new and amazing bootcamp series on AZ400. In this bootcamp series, we would be learning how to design and implement Microsoft DevOps solution. But before starting with the bootcamp episode, I would just give you a quick intro about me. So I am Mubin Girach, a senior DevOps engineer and a tech enthusiast. Now, I would just give you an intro about the topics that we would be covering throughout this bootcamp series. So these topics are nothing but the syllabus of AZ400. You can find the same syllabus on learn.microsoft.com as well. Giving a gist about the topics, and the first topic, which is configuring processes and communication, we would be going through the project planning, the work item assignments, the epic user stories, etc. Covering basically a complete part of Azure boards. Next, we would be seeing how to implement source control or version control system over the complete code developed by a dev team. Then we would be seeing how we can integrate the code and have a continuous integration and continuous deployment using build and release pipelines. But doing the complete setup does not suffice. We also need a security and compliance plan to make the complete setup more secure. So we would be doing a walkthrough of security and compliance plan. Finally, monitoring is a very crucial part in each and every setup. So we would be also seeing the instrumentation strategy. Now, coming on to the agenda for this episode. This being a very basic episode, so we would be going about what is DevOps, why DevOps, and how to get started with Azure DevOps. So, what is DevOps? As you can see through this animation, that it is a kind of continuous process, or you can also say that it is a kind of up or a mindset that many organizations use to deliver and to basically develop and deliver their projects. There is a beautiful definition given as a kind of union of people, process, technology to continually provide value to customers. We would be justifying this particular statement in the upcoming slide that DevOps as a kind of evolvement and it's a kind of evolvement. Now you might be thinking that evolvement. So let me help you to understand that. So before we were having a kind of waterfall model for the projects that many of the organizations are still using. And the agile methodology that we would be seeing today is a kind of evolvement over the waterfall methodology. And how it is a kind of evolvement, let us see that as well. So what was happening exactly in waterfall model is that we were having different phases over here. Like there was a requirement phase, then there was a designing phase over here, and then let's say there was a testing phase, and likewise there were many phases over here. Okay, if I just label these boxes for you. So the first one was requirement gathering. Let us name the second one as designing. The third one as development. And let us have a fourth box. Let's say deployment. And further, there would be other phases as well, but I am just restricting this diagram to these four phases only. Okay. So what was happening is that for individual phase over here, For example, the requirement gathering phase, we would be allotting, let's say, 2 to 3 weeks or maybe a month, a 4 week times. After that, once the requirement gathering has been completed, then the complete team would be going towards the designing phase. Over here, let's say they would be requiring a month or a 2 months time, followed by the development phase. Likewise, it was like a kind of 6 months to 8 months of time which was required for the complete project. But what was happening over here is once the requirement gathering phase has been completed and a month's time has been taken into requirement gathering, further the team would be proceeding ahead towards designing and they won't be coming back to requirement gathering, which itself sounds to be a big drawback over here. So what was happening is that in the requirement gathering, there would be a collaboration between the customer and the team who is working on the project. After this thing has been done and everything has been decided about what has to be achieved, directly after the span of 6 to 8 months, after the deployment, testing, and everything has been done, basically the project is ready for delivery. Then again, the customer was contacted, or there was a collaboration with the customer just to take a kind of feedback or just to deliver the project. So over here, there was a kind of you can say there was only two phases over here wherein the customer was looped in, or the customer was there was a collaboration with the customer. Otherwise, in this whole time span of rest of the 4 to 5 months, there was no contact or no collaboration with the customer. And being into a kind of IT industry and working on various technologies, we all have acknowledged the fact that over the time there are new technologies which are launched in the market, and those technologies are such that they might be capable of doing the task that currently 2 or 3 other technologies have been doing. So it's a single technology replacement with, or we can say single technology replacement for 2 or 3 technologies that are currently being used in any organization. So this was how a kind of evolved over here. Okay. So we would be having a kind of phases over here, which is the requirement phase, which will be taking 2 to 3 months, then design phase taking again 1 or 2 months, likewise. And there was a big outcome at the end. And having no collaboration or very less collaboration with the customer, it was a kind of big a kind of failure for the customer also, because they have been waiting for 6 to 8 months to get their project ready. And then at the end of 6 to 8 months, we know that technologies have changed and might be demands also in the market have been changed. So this basically was not working out. Okay, it was not the success rate of this particular waterfall model for delivering the project was not very high. Then there was a kind of evolvement wherein the agile methodology came into the picture. Now, what was happening in the agile methodology is that uh, if you talk about waterfall over here, there were these phases, and individual phase was taking 6 to 8 months. But it is not the scenario in agile methodology. It's like the phases remain the same, but the cycle of the complete process is of very less time. It's basically of 2 to 3 weeks over here. And there are cumulative outcomes, which means that there are it's like there is a large project or there is a major chunk of the project, and then we are segregating this major chunk into smaller chunks over here. Okay, so this is how the smaller chunks were delivered, are delivered over here basically. And once this particular delivery of a smaller chunk has been made, it was a kind of feedback, or the collaboration with the customer is being made over here to acknowledge that whatever things are ready over here, or whatever things have been deployed or tested are up to the mark, or the customer is satisfied with the delivery or not. And once an acknowledgement has been received by the project team or by the organization who is doing the project, then it was like the next cycle was triggered. Okay, so this is how the agile methodology works basically. And then within agile methodology, we have a scrum process over here. It's a kind of deep dive of agile methodology works basically. And this scrum process is something that we would be covering in our upcoming episodes. But giving you a gist about the components over here which we are using, it's a vision wherein the smaller chunk basically which has to be achieved is discussed. Okay. And in the user stories, it's a kind of informal discussion or informal information about what things have to be achieved. Let's say that we have a vision of the ultimate project goal is to develop a web application, and inside that we have some intentions to have a login functionality, to have a sign up functionality, and many other functionalities over here. So what happens is that in the user stories, we just jot down, a kind of scenario from the user perspective, that what are the things we have to implement and how this functionality should work, like basically the flow of the functionalities. And then further from the user stories, we have a kind of filter, and in the filter we have a product backlog. Okay, so let's say that there are 10 user stories over here. Then we would be basically filtering out these 10 user stories, and we would be further integrating those 10 user stories in the form of product backlog. Like if we have a login functionality discussed over here in the user story, then we would be writing down the items which are required in the product backlog. Like the login functionality will require a kind of authentication, a kind of authorization, and other mechanisms like single sign-on and other things over here. So we would be adding those items in the product backlog. Further, one more filtering would be done wherein only a selected items from the product backlog are taken into consideration, and then over here the sprint starts. And as I told you that the span of the sprint cycle would be of about 2 to 4 weeks, maybe of 15 days or a month, we can say. But it's not like after every employee or every team has been assigned with a work item, then they are again meeting up after 15 days or a month. Over here, there is a daily scrum call. Okay. And in this daily scrum call, everything has been discussed. Might be the scrum master, who is basically doing the supervision of the complete sprint, would be following with the individual person who has been assigned some task, whether the task has been progressed or there is any sort of blocker and things like that. And at the end of this particular sprint, a new functionality, let's say a login functionality, has been developed over here. And then we have a sprint review, okay, where everything is cross verified, that whatever things were discussed in the sprint backlog have been achieved or not. And then we have a retrospective wherein we take the feedbacks from the engineers, that how the sprint went, okay, whether there is any sort of improvements needed, or anything that the complete team is lacking, and things like that are discussed over here. And then the cycle goes on again and again until the complete web application, which is the ultimate goal, has been achieved. So this is how the Scrum process within Agile methodology works over here. Okay. Now coming on to a very great question, which is why DevOps? So the first and very important justification of why DevOps is improved collaboration. So what happens over here is that, for example, over here we are creating a web application, and in this web application, as we know that there would be several components attached. Okay, so let's say that there is a dev team, okay, which is working over here for developing the login functionality. Okay, and then once the dev team has completed with this particular thing of login functionality, the next component over here is that there would be a kind of database team over here. Okay, and or we can say the data team. So the data team would be basically going forward, and it would be seeing that how the MySQL database or SQL database could be integrated with this particular login functionality over here that has been created by the dev team. Okay, so once this is done, the data team would be figuring out, or providing the dev team with the connections with the databases and then this particular users or the complete flow would be storing the credentials of the users other profile details into the database. Then once this particular integration has been done, like the code has been feeded with the connection strings, and the application or the functionality is able to contact the database and upload or modify the queries. Then comes into the picture a third component over here, okay, which is basically you can say the operations team over here, okay. And over here, what will happen is that if we are having an operations team, which will trigger the deployment over here. Okay. So there are three teams now. There is a dev team which is developing the login functionality. Then we have a data team which is working with the databases and providing assistance to the dev team with the connection strings and all those stuff. And then we have an operations team which is looking towards the deployment and creating developed by data and the dev team. Then once this is done, we will also be having a kind of testing over here. Okay, so let's say that there is a QA team over here. Okay, and this QA team would be further doing the testing over here. Okay, so the testing would include some kind of test plans. Okay, some kind of manual testing, some kind of automation testing, and a kind of feedback would be then given that whether the functionalities that have been developed are working fine or not, or the details of the user during the sign up process is getting successfully uploaded to the database or not, and things like that are tested in the QA by the QA team basically. So this is how the collaboration within an organization works. Okay, there is a collaboration of dev team with data team, then with operations team, and with the QA team. But the collaboration does not only mean that kind of internal collaboration, but over here there would be one more component in this particular complete sprint cycle, wherein there would be a collaboration directly with the customer. And collaboration with the customer means that whatever has been created over here, deployed and tested, would be ultimately acknowledged by the customer directly. Okay. So let's say that we have created a login functionality which has everything which was discussed right into the requirement phase over here. So the same thing would be taken back to the customer after a span of 15 days or after a span of 1 month, as per the sprint cycle timings. Okay, the duration of the sprint cycle basically. And once we take this particular thing over here, the requirement basically, just a minute. Okay. Okay, so whatever things have been discussed over here in the requirement phase would be mapped with whatever has been achieved and would be taken with the customer. Okay, a kind of collaboration internally amongst various cross-functional teams in an organization, and then finally to the customer. And the customer would acknowledge that yeah, whatever we had discussed as a requirement has been achieved over here, and then that marks an end to a complete sprint cycle, okay, which was triggered or which was initiated for the login functionality. Once that is done, then we would again kind of again the cycle would basically get triggered over here. Okay, the next cycle basically will get triggered, wherein let's say we would be working on the sign up functionality. So this is how the agile methodology or the sprint cycle will basically work. And these are the components I just explained. And at the end of every sprint cycle, we would be having new functionality developed, which would be a part of the complete project of the web application. Now, the second advantage over here is the better resource utilization. Because what is happening over here is that in this particular diagram over here, or the flow diagram, each and every team is been working on the same functionality simultaneously. Okay, it is not like in the waterfall methodology wherein if we see that, first the designing team would be involved for a month, and then once this particular phase is completed, then the operations, or sorry, the dev team would be working on it for a month. And meanwhile the design team or the dev team is working, no other teams would be involved over here. Okay, so this is how it was working in waterfall, that if one team is working on it, then this one team will only work on it, no other team would be involved over here. Once this team has completely fulfilled all the things which are needed over here, like has created the complete web application, then the testing team would get into the picture and test everything. And once this is done, the deployment team will come into the picture. But this is not how it will work if we talk about the agile methodology over here. It would have a better resource utilization, wherein each and every team would be collaboratively working at the same time. So it has a better utilization of the skills that we have assigned for the project. Then we have a improved issue resolution and reduced complexity, which means that, whatever issue is being discussed, or for example, there is a requirement of creating a login functionality over here. And once we have created the login functionality, and after the end of the cycle over here, at the end of the cycle over here, we would be basically having an collaboration or a discussion with the customer, and we would be figuring out, okay, the login functionality has one thing missing or two things are missing. So it's basically like there won't be anything like you can say there won't be any one big failure or one big list of items which are missing will come at the end, which was there in the waterfall model. Over here, it's like, okay, login functionality, a smaller chunk of the complete project has been discussed, and then we would be discussing the same with the customer basically. Okay, and once that is discussed with the customer, we would be having reduced complexity. It won't be like we have to trace back the developer who has created that functionality, and then have a meeting with that particular developer and understand like how things can be improved. So in case of waterfall model, okay, so what was happening is the complexity was at an increased rate, but over here it is reduced because we are working on smaller chunks and not a bigger chunk at once. And it also considerably impacts the issue resolution, which is in the improved state over here. Then further, we have a kind of little bit more visibility into the system outcomes, because it is not like after we have completed the whole project and then we have a visibility that, okay, this functionality is working with other functionality, like sign up functionality is able to basically update the database, and then login functionality is not able to retrieve those updated values. So everything doesn't come at once over here in the if we follow the DevOps approach over here, or basically the agile methodology. It's like we have kind of more visibility into the system outcomes, because we know like, yeah, login functionality is working, then we have to basically work on sign up functionality and then integration between the both. So we are very much clear about the system outcomes over here. And having more visibility and system outcomes also helps us in faster and better product delivery. So basically, this is a kind of approach which actually enhances the complete flow right from the project planning. Okay, the project planning is being done using the Azure boards over here, and then once that the project planning is being done, there is a dev team which would be working uh, on the complete code. Okay, developing the solution basically, and they can have a kind of version control system which is using Git and GitHub. And once that is done, the operation teams would be basically focusing on continuous integration and continuous deployment. Okay, and we also have test plans which can be used by the testing team. So it's a kind of complete end-to-end thing which we would be discussing in this complete boot camp. And at the end of the boot camp, you would be able to, start taking up projects and doing the complete planning, and then going ahead and having a team of good developers working on the solution, then pushing the code in the version control system into Azure repos, what we have in what we have in DevOps portal, and everything would be end to end, and we would also be covering up the demos, taking into consideration various scenarios. So that is it. and then we would be now looking on to how to get started with Azure DevOps. So over here, you have dev.azure.com, which would be your only URL for the platform to prepare or to practice something for your AZ400. So once you go here, if I just do a fresh start over here, so over here, the only requirement is that you should have a Microsoft account. Okay. So once you have a Microsoft account over here, so it will basically help you to sign in onto your DevOps portal and access the Azure DevOps services. And even if you don't have an account of Microsoft over here, so you can just click on start for free, and then you can sign up for a Microsoft account, and then you can go ahead. Basically, in my scenario, it's like that I already have the Microsoft account ready with me. So what I would be doing over here is that I would be simply doing the sign in process over here. So once you have signed in over here, so you will get a list of organizations. Over here, you can also create a new organization, and then you have a project. So the hierarchy is something like you have an organization, you have a project over here. Okay. And for example, if I have logged in over here, I would be able to see the work items that have been assigned to me. And also, if I'm a developer, I would be able to see the pull request. Okay. So this is how the Azure portal interface will look once you sign in, and you have an organization settings over here. And once you go to the project over here, you can create basically a new project using this blue button over here of new project. And once that is done, so what will happen is that we will be redirected to the project interface over here. And once we have the project interface, again, we would be having the project settings at the bottom. Yeah. So we would be having the list of tools which are available at our end in this particular project. We have boards for project planning. We can have sprints over here. We can have product backlogs, the sprint backlogs as well. And then we have repos wherein the dev team would be committing their code or pushing their code. Then we would be having the pipelines over here, which would help us to do the continuous integration and continuous deployment. Then we have test plans wherein we can specify the test that we have to perform with respect to the project that we have created or with respect to the functionality. Then we have artifacts which would be used for continuous deployment process. Okay. So this covers the complete tools that are available at our disposal when we sign up for Azure DevOps. Then we also have project settings. For every individual project, we would be having the project settings. And in this project settings, we would be having multiple options to basically integrate this complete project with Microsoft Azure portal, with any other cloud platforms. Okay, and many other things can be configured using the service hooks. And we also have the repositories over here, and many other features are available over here that we would be discussing in other further episodes. So that is it for this particular episode. And a big thank you to all of you for attending this episode. And we look forward for same kind of enthusiasm in the upcoming episodes as well. Thank you.